Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of Miami County Monthly News. This edition is about the Living History Day that was a part of Miami County's Bicentennial celebration. The Mount Hope Cemetery Board and staff hosted the event on Memorial Day. 8 local actors portrayed notable Peruvians with scripts written by county historian Craig Adkins. Approximately 200 people attended the event, and there is talk of making this a yearly event. Miami County Monthly News was unable to attend the event. However, MCMN was fortunate enough to get excellent video from local videographer, Jim Allison. Thank you, Mr. Allison, for providing us with the videos. The sponsor for this event was Montgomery Aviation. If you would like more information about Miami County's celebration of Indiana's Bicentennial, please visit their website. The next event that is a part of Miami County's Bicentennial celebration are the fireworks at the Bicentennial Beach on June 25th.
Streetcars in Peru. As a young child, my mother signed me up for violin lessons and piano lessons. I loved playing the piano. I would ride the train back and forth to Marion for my lessons each week, and at the age of 11, I wrote my first song, the Bobolink Waltz. My mother had it published and had 100 copies printed. She was very proud. When time came for me to go to school, my grandfather wanted me to stay close to home and go to military school, while my mother wanted me to head out east to prep school. Now, my grandfather was used to getting his way, but he only had one weakness, and that was my mother. So out east I went to all over the world were starting to sing my songs, which I loved. I was on top of the world for the 1920s and 1930s. In 1937, I had a tragic accident. While horseback riding in New York, a horse threw me off and landed on my legs. Now, Linda and my mother rushed to my side. The doctors said they needed to amputate my legs. But my wife and my mother wouldn't have it. They were afraid that that would crush my spirit and I would never ride again. So I endured more than 30 surgeries to my legs, and I was in constant excruciating pain for the rest of my life. But my love and passion for music kept moving me ahead. I continued to write, continued to be more and more successful. In 1954, Hollywood came calling. They wanted to do a motion picture about my life. Now, it was wildly fictional, but they wanted Cary Grant to play me. Who says no to Cary Grant? That propelled my shining star even brighter and further, and people all over the world knew Cole Porter's songs. I wrote another musical I wasn't quite happy with. I wasn't sure the public would like it. It opened on Broadway, and people loved it. It was called Kiss Me Kate. I won a Tony Award, and it also was turned into a motion picture. Throughout my lifetime, I wrote hundreds and hundreds of songs. Some I kept tucked away and they never saw the light of day. Others are still played today, and you're familiar with them whether you realize it or not. I hope the songs I wrote brought you as much joy as they brought me to write them. Thank you.
Well, I think it was about 1839, the canal that was supposed to connect Peru with the state capital in Indianapolis, it went bust. Well, the folks here thought that it was important that we have a direct route from Peru to Indianapolis, so we started the Peru-Indianapolis Railroad, of which I was a board member. And it was at that time I decided to get involved in politics. You can relate to that. Well, it was about 1850 that we completed the railroad. And at that time I decided I was going to run for the Senate, the Indiana Senate. And I was elected, and I served I served three terms. 3 terms from 1855 to 1877. You know, I look out from this hillside. My wife and I raised 8 children. I ran my businesses. I farmed the farmland. I watched Peru grow. It grew from a bunch of little log cabins to a beautiful city. I've served my community and my state, and I'm very proud of my service here, and I love this town. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to introduce my grandson. He has some information he'd like to impart to you. Here's Mike. Mike, where are you?
Here I am. Hello. I am Brigadier General Hiram Iddings Bars, U.S. Marine Corps retired, at your service. In my youth, calling me Hiram would have been fighting words. The story goes, my father was out of town on business when I was born, and when he returned to town, he ran into the doctor, and the doctor said, well, you got a new Mike at home. Fortunately for me, that nickname stuck. As my grandfather mentioned, I grew up playing in these woods. Later, this became our home too. The active imagination, but most of all, I love practical jokes. To me, it was just all good, clean fun. I didn't mean any harm by it, but my parents and teachers, they didn't always see it that way. When I grew a little older, they sent me to live with my grandparent Iddings in Fulton County. It was from there that I went to Notre Dame University. When it came to my practical jokes, the administration just didn't see the humor in them. Actually, they didn't know what to do with me, so they threw me out. So I went to Purdue. Well, it took Purdue a little bit longer, but eventually they reached the same conclusion Notre Dame did and asked me never to return. So I went to DePaul University. At this point, you can probably imagine that story had a happy ending. Everything changed when my father enrolled my brother Braxton and me in Norwich University in Vermont. It was and still is to this day a first-rate military academy. They knew what to do about my mischief, about my shenanigans. They threw me in the brig. Well, that did get to me. But what really turned my attitude around was the cadet uniform. Dark blue jacket, red stripe down the trousers of my uniform. I felt like $1,000,000. And I did graduate from Norwich. I returned to Peru, where it was my father's desire that I study law. With Spain had pretty much wound down. But hostilities had broken out in the Philippines. I found myself on a troop ship going across the Pacific. I'll tell you, jungle fighting is some of the toughest fighting I have ever seen. The enemy had a base camp deep in the jungle, 200 feet up a sheer rock cliff. The only way up were these rickety bamboo ladders they'd slapped together. I led my men up those ladders, while the enemy busied themselves shoving boulders down on our heads and shooting at us with everything from bullets to arrows. Miraculously, I made it to the top unscathed. With my sidearm, I held my position while the rest of my men joined in the fray. They pulled the fuses on their primitive cannons straight away. Then they fought the enemy back from their defensive positions. We confiscated their arsenal and their other supplies. For that action, some 33 years later, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt presented me with the Congressional Medal of Honor. I have found myself in about every ladies and gentlemen for coming out. Consider yourselves dismissed. Thank you.
I tell you, we've learned more about the history of our town and our community participating in this. Yes, it's fabulous.
Looks good. All right. That's what we want. Commander, go ahead.
Honor guard. Keen hit. Present arms. Order arms. Honor guard. Port arms. Ready. A. Fire. A. Fire. A. Fire. Port arms. Present arms. Bugler.
Good day to you, citizens. My name is William Nesbitt Hood, and I am the founder of our fair city. Platting a town was never my plan when I first came to this area, but the history of Peru is an interesting one. If you care to take a few minutes, I'll share my story with you. And I do most solemnly swear there'll be no more than the gospel truth. Things were changing, and it wasn't the good Lord's will for me to remain in Fort Wayne until the end of my days. Over the years, I had speculated in land, and I heard tell that Joseph Holman had purchased some land 65 miles west of Fort Wayne from the Miami chief, Chief Richardville. Holman planned to plat a town along the Wabash and Erie Canal, which was going town before it ever reached Miami's port. When the surveyors showed up, they were faced with 210 acres of forest, and thick undergrowth, not one square rod cleared. They asked me, "What are you going to call your town?" I said, "I don't care, just as long as it's a short name." A few names were tossed about, and then one man remembered reading a book about a country in South America, a country called Peru. Peru. That sounded good, so Peru it was.
It's nice to see you all today. My name is Aaron Dukes. I became an official resident of Miami County in 1846 at the age of 12. With my family on a farm up near Gilead. My family consisted of my father, my mother, myself, and my 8 siblings. We had to work that farm nearly every day from sun up to sundown. Oh, sure, there was time for a little bit of schooling, but it was mostly farm work. It was at that stage in my life that I knew I wanted nothing to do with farming. A few years later, we moved to a larger farm near the city of Peru and sold the farm at Gilead. Well, I, being 17 at the time, thought it was time for me to separate from my family and find my own way in the world. I was fortunate enough to come under the guise of Mr. Albert Schur, who was the proprietor of a very successful mercantile business here in town at the time. He gave me a salesman's job, took me under his wing, showed me a lot about how to... But once again, saw there were greater opportunities. You see, the westward expansion was taking place at the time. And so I sold my interest in the general store and moved to Mankato, Minnesota, where I got involved in real estate, mining, and mercantile businesses. It was also while in Mankato that I met the love of my life, my dear wife, Mary. And soon we were blessed with the birth of our first son, who I named Albert, in honor of my friend and business partner, Mr. Albert Schur. In 1862, we were blessed with the birth of our second son, William. While 1862 was a good year for our family, it was a bloody year for the people of Minnesota. You see, the Sioux Indians were not receiving their annuity payments from the Indian agent. So there was great unrest, and they started to attack the settlers. In fact, President Lincoln estimated that 800 men, women, and children were killed in Minnesota that year alone. For a brief period of time, I was appointed commander of a military outpost, where our job was to go out and round up the Sioux. And by December of that year, I guessed that we'd rounded up nearly 1,000. I also realized at that time that this was no place to raise a young family, so we sold all of our interest and moved back to Peru, Indiana, and purchased the Holman farm, which was located at what is now the west end of Peru. Now you're probably thinking, but Mr. Dukes, didn't you say a little bit ago you wanted nothing to do with farming? That's true. I didn't purchase the farm to become a farmer. No, I had a much greater interest in mine. You see, the war between the states had ended, and things were prosperous here. People were moving in. So I took that farm and I plotted it in the town lot so the settlers would have a place to live. It's located between Union Street and Grant Street. It is now known as Duke's First and Second Additions to the city of Peru.
And Alliance of Novelties opened in Peru. And then we left Peru as a wagon show and had a real good first season. Well, after 2 seasons of a wagon show, I knew that the only way to build a world-class circus was to move it by rail. So in April of 1886, the Great Wall of Shows left Peru on 15 rail cars. In fact, one probably leaving right now. In 1890,
I bought out Anderson's interest in the circus. In 1892, I purchased several hundred acres out here along the banks of the Mississippi River from Gabriel Godfrey. Gabriel was the son of the last Miami war chief. My plan was to build a winter quarters and grow enough grain to feed my animals in the off-season. In 1900, I had the largest, cleanest, and classiest circus in the country. No act would shock the moms or cause a blush. All was well. In 1907, after much legal maneuvering, I know that's hard to believe, coming from a circus man, legal. After much legal maneuvering and legwork, I acquired the Carl Hagenbeck Circus, title and equipment. Now you see, the Carl Hagenbeck Circus was a world-renowned circus, with the finest menagerie and equipment anywhere. After I acquired the circus, I moved it back to Peru, changed the name to the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus, and we became the largest circus in America. In that April, we left Peru on three 30 train cars. What a sight it was. Well, folks, that's my story. Thanks for stopping and listening. I'm going to hang around here and listen for the collide. Any questions?
It's my favorite time of year. It's the start of a new season for us circus people. Whenever I hear the train whistle blow, I know it's time to hit the road and put a smile on America's face. Hi, I'm Jess Atkins, and I've worked and operated some of the finest circuses that ever rode the rails. For more than 35 years, when I brought the Hagenbeck Wallace back, I left Ringling's employ, and Zach and I organized the Cole Brothers Circus. Now, Joe here, he worked for me for many years at the Hagenbeck Wallace in Clown Alley. He was first in line for a job at Cole Brothers. Tell him your story, Joe.
Thanks, Mr. Atkins. Well, I started in this business when I was just 14 years old. I got a job working for Buffalo Bill's Wild West Ranch. I made good money for a kid. I bought a mule, I trained him, and I built an act. The very next year, I went to work for the Miller Brothers 101 Ranch Wild West Show. I stayed with them for 5 years. In 1929, when the Ringling Brothers bought the American Circus Corporation, I stayed on working for Mr. Atkins in the Hagenbeck Wallace. He had some of the best clowns to ever put on a rubber nose, like Otto Griebling and my best pal, Emmett Kelly. Oh, we were fortunate. The country was slipping into a depression. But we got 3 hot meals a day, a place to sleep, and we got paid to make people laugh. I soon realized that the circus was in my blood. So in 1922, I returned to the circus, working for the American Circus Corporation, right here in Peru. The 1920s was the golden age for the circus. We would pack people in every night from coast to coast, giving each town a show they could talk about for months. I was a cop clown, and I liked nothing better than to keep the crowd in line. I might whack a rube in the head with my billy club. But my favorite thing to do was put people in the wrong seats. And then when the ticketed seat holders would come, usually at the last minute, they were demanding their seats, and the poor unsuspecting souls, I would come up and blow my whistle and, "What are you doing in those seats? The show's about to start. Move along, move along." They didn't know what was going on. Oh, those were the good old days.